Okay, class. Now we are in the second part of this of Gothic architecture. So we got to start with early Gothic. So we talked about Abbe Suger, and Abbe Suger, he is, this was kind of given the task of create this expansion of this old Romanesque architecture. And so, but he kind of, we talked about him a little bit, which he has this idea of providing light, bringing light into the building as much as possible. Light becomes an architectural element. Light becomes a big part of it. And so he starts expanding and creating this design. And here you see in this image the original basilica. And if you, it's right now, it's not really, the same opacity, so it's a little bit lighter. But you can see how this one's a bit more, simple and a lot more thick, versus the outside. And again, I mentioned to you all that whenever you see openings such as here, such as here, such as here, that means that it's opportunity for an opening, an opportunity for tracery, for glazing, for some sort of window for light to come in. So I mentioned to you that this almost starts looking like a dashed line. It starts looking as, not so much poche or thick wall, but it looks a lot more open, like a skeleton. So a lot of people reference this as a skeleton. But besides that, what is another sort of the apse, how it's exploding. We saw how Romanesque, but the Gothic architecture takes that another step. Again, they're always sort of just evolving. Architecture, in a way, just seems like it keeps growing and evolving to a certain point. So here you see in the end, you see something that is called the Chave, and this is again just almost becomes like a new structure. Like it's just open space structure, open space structure. It's just this new idea of everything almost open. And so this is where you had the chapels that we've seen before. The transept, you still see it, but it's not as evident. Before it would kind of come out. Now it's not as evident as before. It's a bit more simple. You do see the heaviness and this on this west end, which we talked about the towers, sort of the westwork happening before. And so you're seeing a lot of similarities of, that we've seen before. One of the biggest things is this idea of light coming in and deconstructing the building. So the Saint Denis is a cathedral built for Saint Denis, and he was someone that, a martyr, was killed. They cut his head off, and he eventually walks all the way. He is such a saint, such a good person. The story tells that he's such a good person that he's able to walk with his head and just keep able to going to this place, and that's this where he finally dies. And so that's why this church becomes a very, very, very important church. So they start building this. Um, and so we start seeing inside the ambulatory and the choir. We talked about the choir. The choir is the space that is, more private for the monks, the people. But again, just simply start seeing the light, just seeing the buttressing, you're just seeing the vaulting, the pointed arches. You see how these columns are so slender. You don't really feel the heavy inside this building, despite, there's glass all around it that you just, if you go in, and the reason why for us it seems sort of normal, but if you would have gone into this building, this was the first Gothic architecture. If you would have gone into this building at this time, and you would have seen, something like this, all the glass and all the window, you would have been like, how is this being held up? Like this is impossible. Because you're so used to, in a very logical sense, you're used to seeing heavy walls to sustain everything, and now you're like, how is this falling into the ground? And again, it's because of the buttressing and the brick vault. and the way they're transferring the loads, but it creates this very religious experience for them. It creates this experience for them, and of light coming in, and not only that, of this lightness and of heaven on earth. And here you're seeing this huge rose window just coming inside. Here's an image of Saint Denis. We talked about his head, walking around, the saint that was able to walk with his head. And going back to the facade, in the facade, we saw how there's only one tower. It was supposed to have two of those, but it was never actually constructed. Here we see it that we've seen before, which it shows the Last Judgment. Again, people were illiterate, so the Last Judgment was a way of making them understand of their sin, I guess, in a way of helping them get closer to God. And another thing that I want you to start seeing is that we talked about these squares, or this sort of square that's sort of used as a grid. So everything becomes a sort of 9-piece grid. And you start seeing here, let me see if I can have another color that makes it more obvious. But yeah, you start seeing this sort of 9 grid thing sort of taking shape. And we start seeing this more in the French Gothic architecture, and it'll change a bit more as we go into Italian and English. But here you start seeing this sort of happening. We see the buttressing very perpendicular to the wall. So here the buttressing is still not as explored as it was, but it's really, really new. We see the 3 entrances, the rose window, we see the sort of finial, the tower, another rose window happening in the back. You see all this light now coming in, and so now it's completely changing. So that was the cursor that would really kind of push everything forward. But now people start really exploring with this. We get to the Notre Dame Cathedral in Lyon, and something that when we talk about Notre Dame or Notre Dame, it means Our Lady. So it's church dedicated to the Virgin Mary. So it's if it's dedicated to Mary, it's a very important church. But there's a lot of Notre Dames. There's a lot of Notre Dames. So they usually Notre Dame, Lyon, Notre Dame, Paris. So there's sort of the city in which they're in that's going to be able to help us understand which one we're talking about. So don't ever just say, "Oh, have you been to Notre Dame?" It's like, yeah, but which one? Because there's so many. So here, in Notre Dame, we start seeing again the same thing of the 3 doors. It's a bit more systematic than in Saint Denis. It's still a wall, but now the wall has become some sort of weaving. The horizontal elements. It becomes hard to see. In this image, it becomes sort of hard to see the surface. It's sort of almost everything. It's the surface, the surface, the surface, the surface. But now it's like very hard to even see the surface. It's sort of everything has just begun to really explore. We're going to see later on the plan, we see now as with the rose window again is here. It's a lot more grandeur, it's a lot more bigger than in the Romanesque. The pointed arches that we've been sort of seeing again and again. We see this tower, so everything is about verticality. So we see these huge towers, but even though they're huge towers, they're not really feel that heavy because of the way they're deconstructing it. It sort of feels like these satellites is sort of like in caves, things just falling down. We see here gargoyles, and I'll show you an image of it later on. So be ready to see can you see what gargoyle is here? And gargoyles, I'll talk about it more later on. But yeah, just kind of guess, what does this gargoyle look like? I know I drew over it, so I'll erase it. And so you start seeing this whole idea of being deconstructed. And here you see inside, you start seeing the arcade. You start seeing the tribune, triforium, and the clerestory. So this is one of the buildings that, again, starts exploring with different sections. And so it's very important to see these 4 sections. Again, this arcade in the bottom, the tribune, allowing people to go. You know, the triform, I've mentioned it before, that it sort of becomes later on removed, and the Clary story on the top, which we've talked about before. So these four sections become some sort of standard for the Gothic cathedrals that we haven't seen before either, or at least not to this extent. But you see, light is coming in, but still light is coming in, but not as much as we want to, because now we're really interested in light coming in, and so some elements are being removed. Remember, we talked about Villard de Honcourt, this traveler that goes around churches and drawing things, and he says he visits this cathedral, and he says, "I have traveled in many lands, but in no place I have seen such a tower as the one at Leon." And you can really, even to this day, it's an amazing tower. With this Gothic gargoyles I'll mention, I'll show you later. But you can start seeing how, you know, they've become very deconstructive in a way. And so again, 3, you start seeing the archivolts, you're seeing the jambs, a lot of the similar elements that we saw before. So now we go into Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, which is probably one of the most famous. Probably when people say Notre Dame, they usually refer to this one. So if you have ever said Notre Dame, you know, it's most likely referring to this one. It's a bit hard to get, you know, you have to go through places in its own little area, but it's it's worth the trip. And again, this is you start seeing this matrix grid of 9 pieces again, sort of happening. Very this grid that they sort of follow to build it. But again, you start seeing this idea, this tower is coming out, the 3 entrances, you know, the tympanum, the pointed arches, the rose window, this biforium, which is this 2 windows just coming inside. And so you start really seeing the Gothic architecture now basically fully finished in a way, or fully really understanding. So this was, you know, it was actually featured in the one of the famous books, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. They made a movie, maybe you've seen it. So that's what really helped that book really push people to be more interested in, again, once again, and help restore a lot of the things that had really started to deteriorate and fall down. And so if you really look at it, you know, you start seeing very small variations of the details that are highly very individual to this era. Another thing is that it doesn't really try to add. We talked about addition and subtraction in the facade. This one is not really adding. It just feels like it's subtracting. So this stone is just really removing. So if we just keep going, we're going to start seeing another image inside. So let's go into the inside. We see this sort of nave. The plan, I don't think I showed a plan unless it was in the previous thing. I don't know. I don't think I didn't include a plan, but the plan is very simple. If you do want to go look into a plan of this, it's basically this. And an easy way that people remember this is actually, you know, when you think of your hand and this is your thumb, that's sort of what this plan looks like. So if you ever have a, you know, want to say, hey, I want to draw a plan, and just look at your thumb and you'll remember Notre Dame Cathedral. Hopefully that'll stick. It's a good imagery to help you. And so so here, you know, we go inside, we see the boss stones and the rift vaulting. We start seeing, again, we talked about the different areas. We start seeing the arcade, you know, and now the triforium seems to be, you know, gone. And so now instead of 4 parts, we only have 3. And you see, you know, windows or lights really start to really play a bigger role. Pointed arches, the slender columns against slender columns. Everything is sort of this idea that it's so sleek and so slender. They start using. We'll talk about this later on, but there's this idea that they start playing with um, uh, numerology. So we saw the number 3 is very important, but another one that's very important is 30, 60, 50, 144. We'll talk about those later. 30, 60, 144, 50. This is sort of the holy numbers of architecture, and so one of the reasons is because the Temple of Solomon, it says that the first floor is actually 30 cubic foot, and the second is 60. So they start playing here using the same pattern. They start using 30s and 60 as their dimension, and 144 and 50. We'll talk about it later. There's an image that I'll show you later, but I just want you to already start seeing how they start playing with this idea of this. So this is one of the most amazing architecture. Something happened, and maybe you know about this. Sorry, it is freezing a little bit, so hopefully it doesn't freeze like last time. But something happened in 2019, and I wish I could, have the image because this is sort of frozen. Yeah, it is frozen. Okay, here you go. There you are. And so here, in 2019, there was a fire, and maybe you saw it in the news. Maybe at the time since you hadn't taken this class, and maybe you were as interested as architecture as now you are. Now you're in love with architecture, hopefully. But in 2019, maybe you didn't know too much, but in 2019, there was this fire that started. There was being a lot of remodeling, sort of. They were doing a lot of work on this cathedral, and this fire just started, and it would cause that the spire, you see it there. We talked about spires before, and the spire just really starts, uh, consumed by fire, and is destroyed. Some of the walls were damaged. There was damage to the interior, but it was really, really prevented by a lot of the stone vault ceiling. We talked about vaulted ceilings, which largely contain the burning roof as it collapsed. So there's an interesting story that that there was one of the, I think it was in Saint Denis, Abusuje, he built this vault that, as we saw before, with this bracing, the centering, and he builds these vaults, and he sort of just leaves them for the night, and this huge storm comes, and everyone's like super afraid because they're thinking that they didn't cover, they didn't protect it, but the vaults they were able to withstand. So that was in a way a sign of God that He wanted them to build it, and second, it was just to show how strong these vaults are. And so now we see it. They actually survived so long, and they're actually able to withstand fire to a certain degree, obviously. Also, the tracery window glass to a certain amount of heat can start, breaking. So there's a video here that I linked if you want to see, maybe you already saw it, but you want to see it. Some of the CNN, I think, some news reporting this. We see another image of the spire just breaking down, falling apart. So it was a very, very sad moment. Actually, one of my professors at the time, he's really his focus is Gothic architecture. I mentioned I took this class. I was actually with him that we just read, this book on Gothic architecture and spires and drawings. And he was actually he was one of the people that got access to Notre Dame when he was studying to study to do a lot of tests and do a lot of research on it. So he was kind of one of the main persons when it was that knew about Notre Dame. So I got to learn a lot about Notre Dame through him. But he got interviewed, and during this interview, he says this: "Why is Notre Dame historically significant?" They ask him, and he answers, "Notre Dame is an emblem of the city, has been for centuries. It was the first Gothic building that went to skyscraper heights." So beginning to get really tall, and is where many of the elements that we associate with Gothic architecture in that era come together for the first time. It's been a national symbol ever since. And he goes on. They ask him, why is this event affecting people emotionally? You saw a lot of people gathering around Notre Dame, crying, images, flowers, and all these things. Maybe you saw that. He's asking, why is it emotionally, and he answers, it's been more emotionally affecting to me personally than I would have thought. At first, you're grateful that no one was hurt, but then you start to feel like someone or something has died. One of my former professors said watching the video of it burning was like watching someone be flayed alive, and that resonated with what I was thinking as well. When you see these big, powerful buildings go up in flames, it reminds us of all how tangential life is. So for them, for many people, this cathedral, it was part of them. It was something that was really, really, really important to them. It was as if it was, part of their culture, their history. And so seeing this really, really affected a lot of people. So it's just bringing a little bit of context or a little bit of culture into into an old, very, very medieval architecture, but how it still has very relevant nowadays. It collected billions of dollars. I don't know how much, but it did collect a lot of money, and it's planned to be, a lot of things to be remodeled or worked on again by 2024. I forget the year, but in 2000 something. So now let's keep going to something a bit still scary, but gargoyles. And gargoyles are, again, they're on the top of buildings. I told you that which one was there was one that was on top of the cathedral. Do you remember which one do you think it is? If you remember the name, it said Leon, so you'll know it was this one. But if you didn't remember, maybe you have 20/20 vision and you saw that it was this ox, it's a cow on top of the building. So gargoyles are, maybe you've seen the show, the Disney show called Gargoyles, which I've heard that they were trying to bring back. I don't know. But the show and there's this, they're built on top to scare people in a way. Again, they're trying to really make them conscious of the sin, of what's going on, but it also provides water to come down, so water can able to flow down. So sort of this gutter system that they use, and again, similar to the vase, similar to the finials, similar to the pinnacles, similar to everything that we're seeing. It could have just been a rock or something with the hole for water to come through, but no, everything they're using for to create this ornamentation, to provide, to make the building feel even lighter. Because if it would have just been a rock, it would have done maybe the same, but if it would have just been solid, it would have seemed super heavy. But the fact that they're creating this negative space, it makes it feel even lighter. It kind of takes our mind away that it's stone. And here, I like this one because it's kind of, I wonder which one of these three is your favorite. I like this one because it's thinking. It's kind of very pensive. This one's a bit scary, but I like that it's looking at the Eiffel Tower. But I think my favorite is this one because imagine just walking. This one is not scary. I guess maybe that's why I like it. But just walking around and you just see this cow, and this cow I don't know. Every time I look at it, I laugh because it's like saying, "Hey, what's up? How's it going?" It's just kind of, it kind of makes you feel like you're eating a sandwich and it's looking at you or something. It's sort of like, I don't know. I would feel awkward walking under this, and I would feel like this cow is always just staring at me. These two, I can kind of, the first two, I'm okay with them looking at me. I feel like that's their job. This cow just seems like awkward. Let's keep going. So now we go into High Gothic. Architecture starts changing, and there's three buildings: the Borges Cathedral, the Vouvis Cathedral, which is one that was sort of falls down, and the Chartres. So we're going to focus a little bit on the Chartres Cathedral. Again, let's look at it a bit on plan. What are the things that you notice? You do see this sort of crossing, this Latin cross. The traffic becomes really, really wide. You see the Chauvet, so this sort of chapels, radiating chapels sort of coming out, this double ambulatory, so it sort of looks like a pilgrim church. There's towers. Why do we know there's towers here? Because of the heaviness of the structure. But you see again this very, very ashy, the sort of in and out happening. But this one, the Borges Cathedral is more like the Dame that we talked about, Notre Dame, a lot more similar, more simple mini transit sort of thing happening, but a lot more simple. So this is the Chartres Cathedral that we saw, that we mentioned we were going to focus on. And I want to make a quick announcement. There's a video called Building the Great Cathedrals. And so there's several cathedrals that we're going to talk about that are mentioned in that book, in that video. It's a PVS Nova video. But so there's going to be extra credit questions for you that are going to be sort of straight out of the video. One of them has to do with the Chartres Cathedral, and I won't tell you what they say, but they sort of meant they say something about Chartres Cathedral. It's a quick phrase. If you don't hear, you miss it. But now it kind of helps you look for something. How they call this building? What are they calling the thing? And there's going to be an extra credit question on that in the final exam. So this was actually built pretty fast. It was built in 1194 to 1220. There's other cathedrals, that have taken hundreds of years. There's some that are still being built, such as, Sagrada Familia, which has taken many years. But this one was actually built pretty fast. So that in itself is something that's very interesting to know. Another thing, you see the towers. The towers are different because originally it was a Romanesque cathedral. It burned down, but here you see, the south is more Romanesque versus the north tower is a bit more fully exploring its Gothic side. So again, I like this tower comparison because many people, and I've done it myself in this class, I've compared Romanesque and Gothic. So that's what people are doing, and not only are they doing it, but there's a lot of elements of Romanesque that are very fluidly converting Gothic. So that's one of the. I like that. Here you can see things of both. So so here, there's in the next image. There's a bifora in the left tower. That we can see. I don't know if we can really see it. Yeah, it's right here in the top. And so here you start seeing the bifora is this window just split into two parts by a mullion. And so we talked about tracery. We talked about that again before. And we also start seeing this buttressing. This is a detail of the buttressing, and what I find interesting is they bring this Roman elements, which it sort of looks like temple-like structures here in this buttressing. So the buttressing, again, do they need to add this? No, but they're deconstructing it, making it look lighter, and bringing elements from other parts. We see inside in the this boss vaulting. We see the light becoming more and more important. The clerestory transform. We see the arcade with pointed arches, again feeling a bit more to light. And here before, Gothic didn't care too much about symmetry, so this is why I believe that maybe they even left this here. We see the tympanum again with the hierarchy, so a lot of the same elements that we sort of seen before. Some of the nave elements that we've sort of mentioned. So you see the changes from the early Gothic to the high Gothic. It starts getting a lot more higher. The height increases. The arcade and the clerestory. And you're seeing how it goes from the early to the high. It just really changed. And these are drawn to the same scale. That's why it's important to know that they're drawn to the same scale. You see the people here sort of the same scale. So they really seems like miniature versus this one. We talked about the aisle, the gallery, triform, the clerestory, and we sort of remove the gallery completely now. So some they started moving elements to provide. You see the clerestory, which is with light. Now the clerestory is almost the size of the aisle, so that's incredible. You're just seeing this triforium. You're just seeing this buttressing. You see how the buttressing, even here, they provide these punctures or these openings so that you can, again, deconstructing it, make it look lighter. Make everything here is about stretching, lightness, verticality. You see a lot of the similarities of the pointed arches. A lot of things is really happening the same. You start seeing the aisles again taller, and you start seeing, you know, the buttressing, how it is differ a little bit. So now we'll go into the Borghese Cathedral, which I did talk that there was going to be others. I won't spend too much time because it's a lot of the things. But here is the you're seeing the buttresses that provide the bracing for these high vaults. You start seeing how much smaller the clerestory windows are that are on Chartres. In Chartres, we saw these huge windows here that are getting a bit smaller. But here you see that the inner and the outer aisles function with the buttress to brace the high vaults of the nave. Even these, the outer aisles, we're seeing these outer aisles, sort of also function with these buttresses to help with the bracing of the nave. And that's something also pretty interesting, which was that's one of the things that I wanted just to kind of mention. Again, not the window's not as big, but it's still super really thin. Very, very pointed arches. This is Borghese inside. We start seeing this. And so this was also use of the sexpartite vaulting that starts replacing the quadripartite. So now we start getting 6 parts in the vaulting rather than the 4 that we were using. So that's the thing that's very, very important to know. The vaulting starts to change. We got this pretty common 4-piece, and now it's starting to become more complex into the 6. So that's why another thing that I wanted to mention about this one. Now we get into Saint-Chapelle, and Saint-Chapelle is really, really, really small. It was for it was a palace built for King Louis IV, and it was mostly to house relics and that he had acquired from Constantinople. And so this is high Gothic, and it's this small, but people call it like a small jewel because it's you know, like small, like, but a diamond, very beautiful. And it's like this virtual glass wall structure. It's basically very small in scale, but inside it has this amazing experience. This is sort of like a lantern, or some, you know, that's one way of looking at it. But since it's so small, since the fact that it's so small, again, very thumb-like plan, the fact that it's so small is that you are able to provide more structure, it has less structure for the building, so you are able to have more light. And so just once. Sorry. So yeah, so you are able to bring a lot more light in. So becomes an amazing, since you don't care since the structure is pretty small, you don't need a lot of structure, you don't need a lot of strength. You're able to really play with the light. And so here you see it. You see how this becomes a sort of amazing lantern that just shines all inside the building. See the vaulting becoming a bit more interesting, more crazy. And here you have this little chapel, which is called the Lady Chapel, and it's not as focused for women, but it's a chapel again for the Virgin Mary, and so that's another thing that's very important for that we're going to start seeing. We'll see that later on. So now we go to early English. We're going to go into early English, and it is English Gothic, and so we're going to go into Canterbury. And this one started again as Romanesque, we start seeing how, it had to sort of evolve. And as it starts expanding and growing, it's sort of, all these plants, as they start expanding and growing, just always imagining at how it's evolving from something. So, the apse gets this Chauvet, this Corona chapel, again, we talked about, it sort of looks like this crown, and then we have this Trinity chapel, so this apse, this really becomes a bit more crazy. We get this sort of like rounded transept, you get another transept, and so the crossing, you get two crossings now, so it becomes a lot more complicated. And so this is part of, again, monastery, so it was based upon Becket martyrdom. And so I don't think there's an image of the inside, but let's keep going with the Salisbury. Salisbury. So here's two plans. We have the plan of Salisbury, we have the King's College, and we have Lincoln Cathedral. So we're going to see all these three, which are representations of this early English style. So again, they're all sort of next to this monastery. We talked about the cloister. Hopefully you remember what the cloister was, which is this sort of open courtyard for them. And then here we see again the chapel house. Here we see what I mentioned before, this Lady Chapel, but now it's even crazier. It's just radiating. It's a star. I don't know what you see this, but it's a lot crazier. See this cloister, so it sort of becomes this sort of private chapel for them, but it becomes a lot more exaggerated. The King's College, I want you to think of it as, here the King's College, I want you to think of it as a Saint-Chapelle, this sort of small idea that they are able to do a lot with it. So we're going to see those things. Here in the Lincoln Cathedral, and again, the different transepts, but something that's very important that we start seeing here in the English, and it's an easy way to recognize, is that it's a lot more perpendicular. So very obvious square chapels. It's a lot more, you see the square and it's sort of all right angles, you do see some angles, you do see squares, but in the shape you do get a lot more perpendicular, more linear, rather than what we've been seeing before. So that's something else that it's kind of more known of the English Gothic. So here in Salisbury, we do have images. There's some images of the outside and the inside of Salisbury, and we start seeing that the cathedral was built entirely in early English cathedral. You start seeing the lancet windows, and when we say lancet windows, it's this sort of oval-like windows. They're not really oval-ish. They're more, like this and then like this. So you start seeing this lancet windows happening here, and all the horizontal lines across the exterior. You start seeing this this line is just really feeling like it's pushing you closer to the interior. And this view shows how the horizontally is really prevailing on the interior as well as the exterior. So the vertical becomes less, and the horizontal becomes a big part of it. You start seeing how the vaulting rooms don't really extend as the walls to the walls as the ribs down. They become just grouped into the piers. But they really just bring from corbels to the clerestory window. So now, instead of we were very used to seeing this into a column or a pier, but now they don't even have that. Now it's in the clerestory, which again, people inside are like, how is this even happening? How is this even happening? So you start seeing the facade, very pointy, very similar to the three arches, openings. The rose, what is something interesting, the rose window has sort of been removed to what some have called a W window. And the reason why W, you sort of see this W there. So it's sort of really changing a lot from what we were used to before. So now we're going to the Lincoln Cathedral, and which again was here's the plan. And in the Lincoln Cathedral, you just how do you know this is English Gothic? One way that you might know that is English Gothic. One way is double transept. You've seen that in Romanesque, so it might not be the only way that you know. But that is one. It's more straight, so a lot more perpendicular. So the apsis normally you see these angles, but here's a lot more perpendicular. But again, that could happen in other cathedrals. But one of the easiest ways is that the Lady Chapel. We talked about the Lady Chapel. Usually, that is very, very more prominent or more important here in English Gothic architecture. So kind of just think of that as you start seeing. And then the most unusual of all is something that is they're called crazy vaults. And that's not just me calling them crazy. That's literally the name that was given to them, crazy vault, because of the rib pattern becomes very asymmetrical. So here you see a little bit of it in the choir vaults. It's just seeing how it's, a lot different to what we've seen here. We see the lancet windows we were talking about, with some mini rose windows, but it's really changing it. And so, but something that is another image as we go inside, very horizontal. This is a facade. I'm going to show you another image, and as the vaults get crazier. But here, we go back and we start seeing very horizontal, very vertical. You do sort of see the grid that we talked about, not as much, but you still do see that sort of 9-part grid. Start seeing the towers very. Something that changes a lot here in the English is that the main portal becomes very, very big. Before they were all sort of very similar, but this one now is completely becomes very, very big. We talked about the crazy vaulting not being very symmetric, and we still seeing that it looks more like a fan. So you've got a piece of paper and you folded it and you've seen how it looks like a fan. So it starts looking more like a fan inside. But again, inside, just take a second to look how amazing this looks on the inside. See the clerestories. You're seeing how this goes into the clerestory. This vault, pointed sort of transverse arches, and this is bringing down, but it's sort of small columns. You see that it's like a big column made of small columns, just to give you again the illusion or the imagery that it's all very thin. We get into Milan Cathedral. Milan Cathedral, we won't spend too much time, but I do want to focus on one thing of Milan Cathedral. But this one becomes it's the idea of the towers and again the idea of the towers and the cross. And I didn't show it was in the plan. I could go back and show you, but now that there's coming back to the tower and the cross, and you have 2 transepts again we've mentioned. So let me just maybe go back. It could be easier to see it. Here we're just seeing, we're talking about, we see the 2 towers. We're just seeing the two transepts. We're seeing the what's it called? No, sorry, this is not the plan. Yeah, no, this is not the plan. No, sorry, I don't think I have a plan. I was confusing with the plan. But the Milan Cathedral, yeah, so it has 2 transepts again, but it can't really see it from here. And at the crossing, you see this expressiveness of the fan vault. So here we talk about the crossing, how important the crossing becomes. But now we have this crazy star-shaped fan-like vaulting. And in the plan, you start seeing the vaults, but the way they're able to create this is through this 8 around the center. So now they are able to have all these different piers supporting this. If we go inside, one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to you mainly about Milan Cathedral is because it has this Lady Chapel. We talked about the Lady Chapel, but inside the Lady Chapel, you see these crazy vaulting. Again, not my term, but it's just very. You see this sort of fan happening here, like this sort of almost like a seashell, but then inside just it just loses itself, you know. It's just land. You see the lands, the winds, you see all these things. But here, it just lose. It almost seems as the vaulting had other vaults, you know. It's like it had like baby vaults and had other vaults and had other vaults, and it has all these different boss stones, this keystone. It's just, you know, and it's just sort of amazing to look at, almost like spider web. Um, but it's really just going a bit crazy. Here you see the fan vault at the King's College. Remember we talked about the King's College, and I like the King's College is again like Saint Chapelle, something really small. And I like these small buildings because you can really play around with it, since you don't have, it's either, you know, you have to. And the other buildings is more about the grandeur, how tall there is, how much light, and all these things. But here they, you know, they have to do something to compensate for the size in a way. So they have this King's College interior, which is kind of connected to a uh, college, you know, a university, and this is sort of like, you know, here it's mentioned as a glass box masterpiece of the late medieval architecture. As in the Saint Chapelle, the walls have been reduced to glass screens and skeleton stone frames. So the plan is pretty simple. Everything's pretty simple, but it really takes this idea of vaulting to a whole new level. It just goes crazy with it. So if you're ever, you know, visiting, this is one of the amazing vaults that you want to see. And again, I included these some German, Czech, and buildings just into one because it's, you know, it won't spend too much time here. But what's important is, again, the idea of the deconstructiveness of the vaults. We saw how now they're, in one of them it was coming into the clerestory, but I didn't bring an image, but in one image, if you want to Google it, there's some vaults that sort of even start looking like railings and start really becoming part of the building in some way. They sort of just come alive. They just come into play into this building. So the Germans take this to a whole new level. So in the first one, we see this view show the pattern created by the ribs. In the second one, we see this is a hall in a church. The nave and the aisles are virtually the same height. So that's something that, again, we haven't really seen. And in the third one, we see this, how the supporting piers rise, brace shafts all the way to the inner aisles that match the height of the nave. So again, it's all these things just really playing with the idea of verticality, light, the constructed material. We're almost done as we go into Italian Gothic. And so this is called Venice Gothic because it's in Venice. And it's, again, we won't talk too much about this one, but it's just want you to notice some things. What do you notice? What do you see? In the top, it seems very heavy. If it was you, and it was maybe, or me at least, I would want to put the heaviness on the bottom and then bring the lighter part on the top. But no, because it almost seems like, you know, you have all these openings, and how is this holding this? You know, it's kind of crazy. But again, this is Venice Gothic. It's just, again, Gothic is just trying to show how, not showing how it's built. It's just really explaining you how crazy, how amazing they're getting into these buildings. How now they can construct and make it seem super light, stretching it. And here they add this sort of finials at the top. Again, because it makes it look more vertical, because everything has to be pointing in Gothic architecture. It's a really interesting building. Here is St. Mark's. Remember we talked about the pigeons, so it's really a place that we've seen before. So we have the idea of Romanesque, and we have Gothic sort of in the same place. And this, some people have compared it to more like a carpet, so a rug. And here you see in the rug, you see at the end sometimes it has something very and or very like these little pieces of silk just coming out. Maybe my drawing is helping understand. I don't know, but yeah, this little silk kind of thing coming out, and inside you have all these patterns, and that's one of the reasons I want to mention this is because Venice is a port town. Again, we've talked about this before. So it's able to go to different cities, different places, and is getting inspiration from a lot of different places. So one of the beliefs is that they did get inspiration from, places where they've seen many rugs, Islam, and other places that they're seeing how this is being done. So here at the Italian Gothic variations, we're going to go into two of them, which is Milan Cathedral and Santa Maria Novella. I really like saying Santa Maria Novella because, as I mentioned, I was in Italy for a while, and I took our mode of transportation was trains, and our stop was the Santa Maria Novella. And it was like almost every day, not every day, but every time we went off into Florence, we lived in a place that was like an hour and a half or an hour. 40 minutes. And so we had to take the train, and it was one of the next stops. And no, a bit more. But the point is, our stop was, one of the stops was Santa Maria Novella. So it's like, siamo arrivato a Santa Maria Novella. And so it become a really fun thing to know, to say. But the plans are pretty simple plans. This coming back to the origins of sort of, Latin cross plan, very perpendicular, very right areas. Here we see the Milan is a bit more complicated, more wide. You can see maybe more pilgrimage-like. The apse is sort of rotating. We do see interesting things happening here. So this is sort of some images. This is Santa Maria Novella. I won't spend too much time in this one because there are two others that I want to talk about. But this view, again, is just if we only have the outside, you see this, this polychromatic ribs. And so one of the things the reason I wanted to show you this is because light is important. It's still important, but they don't use it as much here. Mainly because some people say that it's different places, different weathers, different so different which resulted in them not wanting so many windows. But you still feel the pointed arches and the lightness, the slenderness, and all of this thing. You still see lancet windows at the end. But you still get this Tuscany, very polychromatic sort of colors, this sort of radial colors that they use. So you still, it's very, very, you still see this sort of reference to Roman architecture. And this is the Florence Cathedral. I didn't show you a plan of this one. This one I don't think is in the book, but I wanted to mention this one, because I think you're going to have a pretty, this upcoming, you're going to have this presentation of what is your favorite architecture that you've seen throughout this. And I don't want to make you biased, and you don't have to choose this one for sure, but it is my favorite. And the reason why it's my favorite is because, again, I mentioned I went to Italy for the first time on this sort of, school, this education, sort of study abroad for the first time. And, I was someone, I grew up here in the RGV and never really traveled out of the country. And my first time traveling is to Italy. And like I said, I didn't live in Florence. I lived in a city very, very close to Florence. And I remember when one of our first, and the city where I lived, amazing place, amazing views, amazing everything. But Florence is just an whole other world. And I remember going to the first time to the Florence, and there's this wall here, and I didn't show it, but there's this wall here, not here, but as you're heading, I just want you to imagine as you're heading as you're heading this way, there's this huge wall or this building, and you're just walking. Everything looks really nice, really, really, really amazing. But you finish this wall, and as you end this wall, you just hit by this image of this great cathedral. It just really, 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 really takes your breath away. Instantly takes your breath away. I remember that because honestly, I was like eating gelato or something, just minding my business because I was in Italy and it was pretty cool. But now the image, but when that wall ended and I was able to view this whole thing in its full majesty, it was like mesmerizing. I was like, I honestly, I still think of that moment, and it was one of those moments that it hit me. I'm in Italy. This is something I've never seen. This is completely out of this world. And this is an image that I don't like, that it has this Getty image sort of. I couldn't find another angle that had this, so I don't like this Getty image. I mean, I do have to. I mean, it's there, so I have to use it. But the reason why I like this angle of, because that's sort of how it felt. Sort of how it felt. Like, imagine if you're watching this on your computer, on your phone or something. Imagine, just put this under you and just imagine you looking up, and this is what you see. It's incredible. So this was constructed in it was began in 1296 by Arnolfo di Campo, and it was completed in 1436. Again, remember we mentioned one of them took very, very little, 40 years, and this one has taken a very long time. The dome, there is a dome. It was the dome of Filippo Brunelleschi, but we'll talk about that later on in probably architectural history too. When he died, with Arnolfo di Cambio died, it really slowed it down, and architecture sort of stopped for almost 50 years. The exterior of the basilica is, again, very polychromatic, but now with marble panels and various shades of, green and pink, with white, and it has a very, very elaborated Gothic. Some call it Gothic revival, because it was done later on. And the basilica is one of the tallest churches, and and it had one of the also largest stones made out of brick that had ever been constructed. So again, just wanted to mention this one just because it was the one that really shocked me to a certain point. It has this shocking factor, and so if you ever go, I think it's the only way to get there, because I remember later, many years later, I mentioned I did this travel with some of my family, and I took him to this wall, or this path, and I don't think I even did it on purpose, but we took the same path, and they had the same effect as when they just saw this. So the last one that I want to talk to you about is the Milan Cathedral. And the Milan Cathedral, again, this was done by Peter Parlow in 1392, which was a master mason. Again, they bring all this. Peter Parlow, he was sort of like an all-star, rock star of doing Gothic architectures. He's done so many, and they kind of bring him and say, "Hey, you want to do this?" And so, but here it's just becomes super ornamented, super exaggerated, pointy. You see that a lot more entrances than we've seen before, a lot more openings, a lot more sort of like doors with balconies sort of coming out. Where's the rose window? I know there is some sort of window, but it's gone. We have, instead of towers, we have like other mini towers. The buttressing is sort of faded away. It's in there, but it's sort of hiding. You see this more triangular perspective. The tympanum is more grounded, so it's a semicircular. So you see that all these different things happening. And again, this is one of the most important ones in Milan, and it's one of the most famous. Again, this one has a shocking factor. I think over here on this side, there is on this side there is like a subway or a train or something, the subway. And so in order to go to the Milan Cathedral, this is one of the stops, and so I remember the same thing happened. I didn't know. I knew it was the Milan stop, but I didn't know that as soon as you get out, you see it, and as soon as I get out, you just see this, and it's just mesmerizing. It's incredible. It's an amazing mix. So this is one of the that I do also encourage you to see. This is probably one of my second favorite. I did this drawing of this. I think many people apparently liked. I didn't like it myself too much, honestly. But actually liked, but I spent a while here just drawing all of this. So now let's end with going into a little quiz of the for the final. So I'm going to go into the other screen so I can show you a quick review of that final. And so the final, as I mentioned, it's going to be cumulative. So that means that it's a combination of everything that we've learned. So you're going to see from the beginning, early Islam. You're going to see Romanesque. You're going to see everything. So it could get a little overwhelming, but hopefully, I mean, as I mentioned, it's open book. Hopefully, you've had enough understanding of it that it'll be easy. So let's go. So this one, a lot of the question is going to be what style is it. So again, this is not. I think it's a combination. Here I have a combination of Gothic and Renaissance. I mean Romanesque. So I'll focus on the Gothic for this chapter. So I already went Romanesque. So the question for this one is, what is the name? And it's going to ask what style. And this is early Gothic. Early Gothic, again, is very fun. There's another name that they also sort of use for this time, and it's flamboyant Gothic. And the reason, again, it's called flamboyant is because you see it as it becomes more decorative, extremely decorative, as we start seeing in the fan vaulting. So what is the name of this architecture and what style? What style is it? What name? Remember, I mean, hopefully this one is pretty easy. That is in Venice. So Venice, what? And hopefully that. What main three types of Gothic styles in medieval England? So there's three. So I talked about those. If not, they're in their book, but just have that in mind. There's three types of Gothic styles. Here it's going to be important for you to label all these parts. So there's the triforium. There's a brick vault. There's an arcade. There's a nave, and there's a clerestory window. So hopefully you can do that without, that you can be able to know which is which. Building the great cathedrals, there is some questions. I don't think, I didn't include them. But there's going to be, I think, 3 questions for extra credit from the video building the cathedrals. One of them I mentioned was what happens at Chartres, like what are they sort of called Chartres. The second one is going to be, I think it's also in Chartres Cathedral. There's a interviewer, someone doing an interview, and what is the name of her, and what does she talk about? That's sort of going to be the question. So it's also around the Chartres video. So if you watch it, around that part. There's another thing that was several churches that have talked about, Chartres being one, Amiens being another, Notre Dame, and so Saint Denis. So there's some churches that are mentioned. So I'm going to include a list, and it says which one was not mentioned. So you have to know which church was not mentioned in the video. So those are, I think, the 3 questions that are going to be about. Oh, another one. It's going to be around Amiens Cathedral. In Amiens Cathedral, they do something really, really amazing, which is they put this chain around the building. But in order to create that, they need some tools. So during that part of the video, they're going to talk what is the tool that they sort of reinvent from the Greek architecture of the Greek times that they're able to bring back and reinvent to help them build those. So be in mind, just keep that in mind as you watch those videos. Again, I told you this image was going to come back, so just know all of these elements. It's probably one of your favorite, I'm guessing. I know it is a bit stressful taking it, having to label all of those, but sorry about that. But hopefully, just study this image and it'll be good. Saint Chapelle in Paris has one of the following features are presented in the church. It's gonna mention some things about Saint Chapelle. What are the features are in Saint Chapelle? So Saint Chapelle, I won't tell you what the features, but just be mindful of what's going on inside Saint Chapelle. I think I skipped one. So what is this? What kind of vault? There was one term that I called was crazy vaulting, but it's not going to be that one. It's sort of a bit more like something that gives you air. The first person to use innovative structural and decorative features in a church that became the first Gothic building. It was who and where. We talked about this guy, and we mentioned it was in the beginning of the lecture. Where did Gothic architecture originate? I didn't really mention this, but it was, hopefully you got the hang of it, as we talked about the early architecture, but it was in northern France. Flying buttresses, what are they? How does it look like? So it might be an image, it might be some description, just so you just really know. This is more for Romanesque. So what building is this? Notre Dame de Paris. So I'm giving you this one. Again, it was, the plan is pretty simple, but it was the one that burned down. So it's, this is one. This one is, what is this one? Remember, this one's kind of easy to remember because it has the different towers. Romanesque and almost more Gothic. Saint-Chapelle was commissioned by who? I mentioned this. I said it was a king. Blah 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 blah. So hopefully, sort of know who Saint-Chapelle. This one's really, really simple to know. Hopefully, again, it has that wow factor. This is one of those architectures that just has this wow factor. So what is the name and where is it? A little bit of that. So the lancet, I talked about the lancet window and the rose window. I already gave you the answer, I guess. But what are they? It's sort of hard to say rose without window when it comes to Gothic. So what is this? What is this? The Borghese Cathedral. I'm also giving you this one, so you might have an image. Is this true or false? The Gothic style gives you more light than the Romanesque. I didn't. So is it true or false? You answer that. This is more Romanesque. Which of the following are characteristic of the Gothic style? So it's going to be a list, and just so you know what is Gothic. The most style of most churches along the, so this is Romanesque, Leaning Tower, Pisa. What is the purpose of that building? So, okay, gargoyles. What are they? What is it? Talked a little bit about that. The term Gothic was not used to describe this architecture until the Renaissance. Was this true or false? I mentioned it also during the lecture. This is not, is it just stave? Was the first Gothic period, what was first, comma, the Gothic period or the Romanesque? So hopefully you know this, and I think that's pretty much it. I think that's, I don't know, I don't think there's another one. Yeah, that's it. So, okay, thank you so much for listening, for being part of this class. Thank you for just being, this whole semester. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you really got something out of it. Hopefully, you have this. Hopefully now you look up, and when you look up, you can see architecture in a whole new perspective. Hopefully, there's a second part that hopefully you take either with me or with someone else, but take the second part. It's sort of like a cliffhanger. You don't want to stay just here. There's a lot more architecture to study, and maybe hopefully you do become interested to the point that you want to study architecture. And if you ever need help with that, getting information about architecture school or something like that, let me know. Or any other question that you need help with, you want to just discuss architecture, I'm here. So again, any question, anything, feel free to let me know. Start preparing for the final, start finishing all the assignments, start working on everything that's sort of left, any upcoming assignments, any upcoming anything. So I really appreciate you taking this class. I really appreciate you being part of this semester, and I look forward to, if we do take the second part, if it's with me or any other professors, that here, that are really great, that will really, again, also inspire you with architecture. So if you are studying architecture, and I'll end with this, if you are studying architecture, apply everything. History is not just meant to be learned, but it's meant to be applied. So apply many of these elements into your architecture. And if you're not in architecture, Now you have something new to mention as you travel, or even if you don't travel. A lot of this element, Gothic architecture, can be seen everywhere. Romanesque can be seen everywhere. Greek, now has become part of everything that we in common architecture, or when I say common, just very mainstream to a certain point. So again, just thank you. Any questions, feel free to message me. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this course.